United States silver eagles are in hot demand, but no supply. We obviously have silver miners around the world that are currently shutting down their silver mines to deal with the regulations of the governments in the countries that they're in to again ensure that their workers, staff, employees are healthy and able to continue when we get through this pandemic.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And after another fascinating week in the silver and gold markets where we've seen surge in demand, especially on the retail level, now we're seeing issues with liquidity on the LBMA and COMEX. So will be certainly interesting to see how it plays out going forward. And fortunately, I am joined today by Jim Mackenzie of Viscount Mining, who is a big silver fan, is out there digging up some silver, and is kind enough to join me, talk a bit about the markets and some of the things he is seeing. So, Jim, great to have you on here today. How are you doing, my friend?
I am fantastic, Chris. Thank you very much. A pleasure to join you today.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on here. Had a lot of fun talking with you last week because I know you're a big fan of the precious metals, and certainly it's been interesting times in the world, but in the precious metals in the past couple of weeks. Curious what you're seeing and thinking about everything that's been going on.
Well, obviously very concerned about the pandemic that we're all dealing with now, and hopefully everyone is safe and healthy and keeping the social distancing in mind. Interesting last couple of weeks with the markets, in particular gold and silver. I'm always at a loss for words, which is rare for me, talking about why the price is where it is, in particular looking at silver and the ratio to gold. I have been very confused about that over the past while. I see that there are silver shortages around the world. I see that the United States silver eagles, I believe that's what they are in hot demand, but no supply. We obviously have silver miners around the world that are currently shutting down their silver mines to deal with the regulations of the governments in the countries that they're in to again ensure that their workers, staff, employees are healthy and able to continue when we get through this pandemic. But especially silver again is a big focus of mine. Just based on the fact of the silver property that we have in Colorado. But, I always wonder about the manipulation of the price of silver. There's been a number of articles out over the last little while. When I look at the uses of silver in the world, and in particular in the medical supply area, which we know is under serious weight and demand right now, in the use of solar power, electric vehicles, etc. And I just don't see silver moving up like I believe it should. And I think there's been some significant manipulation. I don't want to mention names. There's been articles out. I think they're certainly available for people to read. But yes, I've been concerned about where the price of silver is. Obviously, the price of gold as well. I think there's been some serious manipulation going on there. I think there's been a lot of selling, especially in the last number of weeks, possibly by banks, countries. I'm not privy to all that information, but sitting in the arena with everybody else, that's sort of what I'm getting the gist of. But certainly believe that this is an opportunity right now for gold and silver that we may never see again in our lifetime. And that I'm very excited about.
You're preaching to the choir here, and it's beautifully put the way you phrased everything there, because Jim, and as you know, we talked last week, and even between a week's time, and now the Federal Reserve, apparently quantitative easing wasn't enough. We had to go to unlimited quantitative easing. I was reading a Zero Hedge article last night that this week the Fed will be printing $125 billion each day, which means this week alone they'll be printing more money than during the QE2 program. So obviously a lot of demand coming into the market. It's not surprising that people are buying any piece of silver they can find. And you touched on something that I'd love to hear you expand on, because you mentioned the miners, a lot of them are shutting down mines right now because with the price of silver back down around $14, that's below the cost of production for a lot of these guys, which means if the price stays there, you're going to see the supply fall. Is that correct?
Well, you are. I'm not necessarily sure if they're shutting down. I don't know what each company's costs are to mine silver. You know, it all depends on, you know, is it open pit? How deep is it, etc. But I was basically, Chris, referring to the fact that a lot of the mining companies are concerned with the health of their employees and want to be good stewards and make sure that, you know, when you have a large group of people, you know, if they're working in an underground mine situation, et cetera, that they are not infecting other workers who may be taking it home to families, again, depending on what part of the world they live in, or if they're, you know, on a mine site that isn't close to a population area. So I guess it might be an advantage for some of them to shut down at this point. But I think the only reason that they're doing this is not because of where the price of silver is, because it is because of the COVID-19 and this pandemic that's going on. And as I say, you know, we will get through this. Not sure how long it's going to take, but you know, once we do, everybody will be back in business. And as I alluded to earlier, silver and gold, especially silver, is extremely undervalued right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of people looking to go to silver, not only to buy physical silver, but also for the use of silver that I mentioned as we were speaking earlier, with all the applications that silver is used for as compared to gold, for example.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think most of the folks watching who come to the channel are of that same mindset. And fortunately, perhaps if there's anything better than silver, maybe it's getting leverage on silver miners. And as you mentioned before, and we talked again about last week, which I thought was interesting, especially as I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and I hear a lot of the locals talk about how much metal there is in the Rockies, which are nearby. Although I've wondered why no one's out there digging for it. And I hear it's not the easiest place to get permitted. Although you actually have a project that is permitted in Colorado, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Our project is in Silver Cliff, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from Denver. This is a property that had significant exploration, drilling done on it in the 1980s. Two companies specifically were working there. One was Tenneco Minerals, which was a subsidiary of Tennessee Oil and Gas, a big NYSE listed company. And the other company was called Coke. What's significant is that Tenneco went in and at the Cape deposit, which is part of our property in Silver Cliff, they proved out 50 million ounces of silver. that they were going to mine open pit. They were in the process of building a $30 million mill to process the silver. And Tennessee Oil and Gas got bought out by a Belgian conglomerate who had no interest in the mineral sector that Tennessee Oil and Gas had. This Belgian company was interested in the oil and gas assets. So the project was halted, and the property sat there until we picked it up a number of years ago. The other one that I mentioned on our property that was drilled, there was 60 million ounces of silver proven out there. But at the time, silver was worth, when they finished the program, was worth $2 to $3 an ounce, and wasn't feasible for them to put it into production. Going back to the Kate deposit, which is where we have done all our work on the property so far, we've gone in and proven out 13 million ounces of the 50 that Tenneco proved out in the 1980s. We drilled some of the highest grades of silver ever drilled in North America. And we are very excited about the opportunity to continue to expand that resource into a compliant 43-101. So as I mentioned, 12.7 million ounces so far, and we will continue on the property this year, and we hope to have a resource out compliant 43-101 by the end of the year. Our geos believe that there could be more than 50 million ounces of silver currently sitting at the Kate deposit, and that's based on, we did core drilling when we drilled, and back in the 1980s they were doing RC, or reverse circulation, and we had 100 to 200% higher grades than what they had drilled back then. So we're very confident that there is more than 50 million ounces sitting on the Kate deposit. So we're anxious to get on there this year and continue our drill program. You mentioned, Chris, that there was issues, and people have mentioned it in Colorado, not as friendly as Nevada is for mining. A couple of things that I will mention. First of all, the town of Silver Cliff is 100% behind us. We have a very good relationship with the mayor, city council, the town folks, and of course, the property that we acquired is from local people in the area. And they are very encouraged with what we've done and how we've handled ourselves in the past, and are very excited about us moving forward. Now, as far as working and actually, you know, you go from drilling to putting a project into production, but and there is concern in Colorado about taking mines and getting them started up and producing. A couple of things. One, Newmont has a project 60 miles from us that is currently in production. And at the Kate deposit, we are currently running an open pit quarry operation. And what's happening there is we are removing the overburden with constraints provided by our geos. And this ensures that our primary resource remains untouched, but becomes more accessible when the property is ready to be mined. Also, it confirms that the city is comfortable with an open pit operation, as well as the state of Colorado. And certainly, as I mentioned, the development of the Silver Cliff deposit is important to the area, as it will create jobs and economic activity in the county of Silver Cliff. So the quarry operation is licensed by the state of Colorado. So that should put anybody's fears aside about the opportunity to move this into production at some point down the road. basically, with the new legislators that have been elected, one of the goals that they have is the preservation of the environment, and our plans for the property do not differ from what they feel should be done. We've had discussions with them, and we have no issues. So we're very happy with our relationship with not only Silver Cliff, but the state of Colorado.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you found an area that has a good profile for political reasons, not easy to access, but sounds like you've been able to get a nice sweet spot there. And I know you also have a project that you mentioned about in Nevada that I believe has been described as the best property without a major involved. Perhaps you could comment on that.
The property in Nevada is Cherry Creek. It's in northeastern Nevada, part of what's called the Pequot Trend. This is a property that produced mid-1800s to the early 1900s gold and silver. In the 1940s, the U.S. government went in and mined the tungsten on the property for the manufacture of munitions during the Second World War. And then the property lay dormant until we put it together back in 2011. And the main reason for that was there were 5 families that controlled the district, and they were the Hatfields and McCoys. So it took a year for me to put it together, meet with all the families. What we ended up with was patented land with 2,600 acres of, as I mentioned, all patented land with 20 previously producing gold and silver mines on it. We have since expanded the property to about 8,000 acres, and that was based on the work that we've done. This property, significant high-grade gold and silver. The highest value of silver that has been sampled on the property is 8,700 grams a ton, and the highest gold sample was 76.9 grams a ton. We've done a number of drilling programs on the property. At one of the previously producing mine, the Doctor's Cut and Teacup, we got significant silver assays over distance there. And we also did some work on an area called the Exchequer in New Century, some drilling there as well with gold and silver numbers that we were very happy with. A couple of points that are significant about this property. As I mentioned earlier, it's located in the Pequot Trend, and 60 miles north of us is Newmont's Long Canyon property. Newmont's around us on both. I thought of that. They're around us on both our properties, Colorado and Nevada. But they're 60 miles north of us. That property was bought for $2.1 billion back in 2010 without a resource. And our geological team believes that it is a much better property than what Newmont has at Long Canyon. And there's a number of reasons why. We had a thesis done. There was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mike Russell, who used to be the chief geo of Newmont, and he is now the associate director of, or professor, pardon me, of geology at the University of Nevada. And he also is on the board of the Nevada Bureau of Mines. His top student did his master's thesis on Cherry Creek, and it was very significant. It certainly documented this large, long-lived hydrothermal system that is showing an abundance of hydrothermal-induced mineralization, which encompasses a footprint of nearly 8 square kilometers of very favorable structures and stratigraphy. And it also documents the various mineral occurrences and relates them to each other in time and space, which is extremely useful for pursuing exploration targets. And we've been going through this document with our geos and putting together targets that will be drilled this year up at the property. What else is significant is when Viscount went public, in Canada, you have to have what's referred to as an NI 43-101, which in this case qualifies the Cherry Creek property as a property of merit. And we hired Snowden mining consultants, which are one of the biggest consultants in the world. And what they looked at on Cherry Creek, and they said that there were amazing similarities to Newmont's Long Canyon property, which makes sense because we're in the same Pequot trend. And it has been said to us by a number of significant geologists that this is the best property currently in Nevada without a major involved. So we're excited about getting back on the property this summer and continuing drilling as we have in the past. And we will be going into significant targets that we have identified based on our previous work and the thesis, and that is encompassing both gold and silver.
Well, Jim, it sounds like you have some good projects going there, and perhaps just in wrapping up, could let folks know who are listening at home how they can find you if they have questions, if they want to get more information, any numbers to call or a good website to look at.
Well, absolutely. It's our website is viscountmining.com, and Viscount is spelled V-I-S-C-O-U-N-T. And we have lots of information on there on both properties, as well as our latest PowerPoint, which is certainly worth spending some time on. If they have questions and would like to speak to me directly, I'm at 604-960-0535. And I am happy to speak to anyone who calls. I will certainly return calls. And if they want to reach me by email, it's jim@viscountmining.com. So they have a number of ways to get a hold of me, but certainly recommend to go on and have a look at the website, specifically under the investor section, the latest PowerPoint that we have on both properties.
Well, Jim, I sure appreciate that. Perhaps once the world returns to normal, maybe we could do a trip down to Colorado, and anyone else who'd like to join in, perhaps maybe they can come too and look for some silver down there. Certainly think it's a fascinating environment, and you're on the right track and looking for some good things. So appreciate you joining me here, and we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Chris, a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed it.